Welcome back to Bonanza Disc Golf and to another episode of Project 100, where, in a very surprising turn of events on this series, where we follow my journey from going from an MA1 player to someone who's going to be playing all MPO in 2023 and hopefully some Pro Tour events with the eventual goal to cash at a Pro Tour event. And during the series, we've been focused so much on my backhand because that's what I've been working on for the past about 5 weeks. But in this video, I want to talk about 2 cues that I've been using that have actually gave me more distance in my forehand as well as eliminated a lot of forehand wobble. But I'll go over the quick basics of a forehand that we've talked about a little bit on the channel already, and I will like to say that this video is brought to you by Flippy Disc Golf, maker of some of the most comfortable and fun disc golf apparel on the market, including this hat, which as you can see I've worn a ton, this shirt, super comfy, as well as, for most of you guys who aren't as lucky as me to be in Florida right now, a lot of really nice hoodies. And you can ask my wife, I genuinely don't think there's been a day that I haven't worn these hoodies, even though we're in Florida, unless it's just been like literally 80 degrees into the night. I'm gonna wait till after this video to put these on and show you how they look. But I've gotten questions before about how they run in terms of sizing, and I'll definitely say that they fit a little bit big, but not a whole size up unless you want it to fit tight. I personally like the slightly baggier look because it still looks very clean with all of the design on it. So both of these are mediums, this is a medium. Let's go talk about that forehand real quick, and I'll talk a little bit about Flippy later. But if you wanna pick some of these up, especially their hoodies, hats, jerseys, all of that will be linked down in the description, and I have a special link that you can go through so that you can help to continue to support the channel. Because when you support the companies who support the channel, I'm able to make more and better content and get some more sponsorships. So let's go check this out. Now, if you guys have been around since the beginning of my Project 100 series, we actually started looking at my forehand because it's just a pretty easy place to see that I was going to tear off my shoulder, essentially, if I kept throwing the way that I was. And a lot of that is because I've heard the advice all the time that you need to run up straight towards your target. And so because of that, my legs were always straight, meaning that if I wanted to get the disc to lag behind me, I basically had to throw all arm because my hips were already facing open to my target instead of being closed off away from it. The first thing that I worked on with Josh from Overthrow, and this is something that even those people who say, oh, you have to run up towards your target, a lot of them are talking about your last step, but if you watch them throw, they'll actually close off their hips before they get to that last step, because the main thing that we talked about is getting these last 2 steps to be essentially 90 degrees from one another. Not fully, and this can definitely also be angled a little bit inside if I'm throwing straight at the target, but having this foot close off the hips here so that as I'm striding forward, my hips are facing away from my target so that there's an opportunity for them to open up, then my shoulders can open up, and then I can snap my wrist and sling the disc through. So this is what my old forehand form had looked like, where because I was so facing the target, my shoulder had to do so much of the work of getting the disc from behind my body to forward. And I was getting decent-ish distance. I was probably maxing out around 340 to 360 feet, but I never felt good after I threw. If I threw a lot of forehands in around, I could feel it. And if you guys have been watching some recent videos, you'll know like right now, I actually am feeling a little bit in my elbow and shoulder, but that's because I'm going on vacation in 2 days from now. You're actually watching this while I'm on vacation. And because of that, I've just been overworking my body. So it's not something that's gonna be bad for the long term, but for now, I just need to take it a little bit easier. But honestly, here's kind of what surprised me recently is I have not been working on my forehand at all. I guess the only thing that you could say would be me working on my forehand is like watching coverage, and because I've been such a form nerd about everything, I'm also a little bit of a form nerd about the forehand. But one thing that I noticed so much is when you watch Chandler Kramer throw the forehand. If you don't know who he is, definitely look him up. Super cool guy out of Texas. He placed very well at European Open and then Butler County Classic. But what you see him line up for the forehand, it looks like he's a lefty player, where he comes up and he like basically looks like he's throwing the lefty backhand shot. And so I had watched that happen. I was like, I'm just gonna try that. And so when I went up to throw, I went up and I just focused on throwing the lefty backhand. And I noticed that that in general was good. So let me show you that. It didn't fully fix everything. It actually created a new problem because it worked too well in one aspect. But if I just focus on throwing the lefty backhand, you see all that wobble that's in the disc there? I'm throwing that lefty backhand and that's fine, but the disc wobbled a lot as it came out of my hand. And the reason for the wobble, at least in my understanding, and like I say in preface in all these videos, I'm just trying to share my journey and the things that have helped me. I'm not a coach and I'm not trying to be a coach for anybody. And I know that sharing these cues is always helpful for me to hear from other people, so I figured I'd share them with you as well. But from what I understand, wobble that's in a disc can be off-axis torque where you're throwing. I don't quite understand that, honestly. I'm gonna keep it a bug with you. But the other way that it can come is if the disc is going too fast for how much spin is on it. And that's why sometimes you'll see lines look exactly the same from a pro versus an am, and the pro's disc goes 200 feet farther. A lot of that's because they're throwing it faster, but they're compensating with enough spin on the disc that it can hold that fast speed instead of just basically flopping all around and then petering out early. And no one knows the perfect ratio, at least from what I understand, of spin to speed. But I know that when I'm throwing it like that, there's too much speed on the disc for how much spin I put on it. So I need to focus on putting more spin. And the second cue really helps with that. But real quick, let's talk about Flippy Disc Golf a little bit more. Flippy was the first company to ever sponsor my channel, and they have customizable jerseys as well. If you, your club, your business wants to get something customized through Flippy, you can also go through my link, and they have customization with graphic designers if you need help with that, all the way from one piece to however many you might need. And you might be able to look out for some Bonanza merch at some point that we do with Flippy. So I would 100% check them out. Now let's quickly take a look at what the second main cue is. And when I say cue, I'm talking about things that I tell myself to do as I'm going to throw. So when I get on a tee pad, in my head, I think throw the lefty backhand and snap the wrist. Those are the two things that I think about. Whereas I'm going to my throw, I want to make sure that I close myself off from the target. If my target's straight ahead of me, I want my hips to be this way so that they can open up and fire. And Ryan Sheldon, other people talk about hip to shoulder separation, where these fire first and then the shoulders come through, and all of it brings your hand and your wrist together as the tip of the whip at the very end to get the most snap on the disc, which correlates to speed as well as spin. And then I focus on throwing the lefty backhand, which opens up my shoulders because my hips fire first and then my shoulders open. And honestly, that's been the main thing that's kept my elbow closer to my body, which is a little bit better of a placement, and you see that on most pros. I was watching some Forehand Form with like Eagle McMahon, all the great pros, especially on hyzer releases and flat releases, they tend to have their elbow tucked a little bit closer. Big Germ is a big example of this. And when I was just focused on just opening my hips and throwing, everything kind of stayed out here, which is also a little bit prone to injury, better than it was before. But by throwing that lefty backhand, everything stays a little bit more compact here. And then at this point, I just have to focus on snapping my wrist. And that's helped me to be able to forehand putters, mids, fairways, and drivers. And I feel relatively comfortable up to about 360 to 380 feet of distance with like just a solid throw, nothing crazy. So I don't see myself not being able to push past 400 within the next couple of months as I add in more strength training. So let me give a couple examples of throws here. That had enough spin, not quite enough, and that's something that I can continue to develop, especially in one of the things that I've been told to do a little bit more is instead of starting my wrist like this, which I tend to do, starting it cocked all the way back, because that increases that spin as it is. We're gonna go now with the Birdie Disc Golf Supply Strike, just on a little hyzer flip line. Yeah, that's a great shot. And this just helps me to be more controlled too, because having my wrist out here or my elbow out there compared to in here helps me a little bit more control. We're gonna go flippy again just to show you how it works. Essence on a flippy line. That one had a good amount of speed and a good amount of hyzer that I was just able to get out there and get down. Throw this strike a little bit flatter, so keeping that rotation a little bit more straight. And that'll turn and come back. That's really solid. There is definitely still some off-axis torque there that I can work out. I think a lot of that is just my spin rate is not fast enough on these discs yet. And I think the faster my spin rate can compensate, or like the more spin I can put on the disc, there's still a lot of speed in these discs that isn't able to actually fully fly because I'm not spinning it enough. But there is one last tip that I have for throwing anhyzer forehands if you tend to be just a hyzer forehand player like I have been, meaning that you can still push it forward and throw some ante on it, which is something that Josh let me know from Overthrow Disc Golf. And a lot of it is when I release flat here. And I think that this is something that I'm going to be working on anyways, where you see a lot of people release flat and still pronate in order to help kind of keep everything a little bit safer. Could lead to more problems in the future, so I'm gonna try to fix that, where instead of releasing just flat and staying there, because you can feel a little bit of tension there, staying flat and then pronating right after. But he also said make sure that you just finish down instead of finishing flat and pronating, finish down if you want to throw anhyzer. So I can throw the same shot, but just finish a little bit more on an anhyzer angle. So I'm gonna show you that now, hopefully. Still not the best at it. Man, there's still just more spin that I gotta figure out how to impart on that disc. I think a lot of it is I'm just not cocked all the way back before I throw and just making sure I keep it tight. I mean, those are solid, but probably only like 330 feet. Not the end of the world. I think one thing to help as well with throwing mids and putters on forehands, because even flippier stuff, like I've been feeling a lot more confident with it, is Thinking about the lefty backhand as speed and this, flicking the wrist, as spin. If I want to throw a shorter shot, all I'm gonna end up doing is kind of throwing, instead of like having a more full reach back here, like you think about with a backhand, when you think about, hey, some people call it coiling with your backhand, like I'm gonna coil all the way back here so my shoulder is here. When you don't need a full reach back or less of a coil to throw a shorter shot, you just come here. And so similarly on your forehand, with like a putter shot, instead of coming all the way back here and then throwing and snapping, you just come here and then you just throw and snap. If I don't need to throw as far, it's really simple, just super simple, just get a lot of spin there. A lot of it is not getting all the way back and throwing too much speed into it, like this shot, because it's a little bit harder for it to hold that torque. It's a little bit more, let's have a little more finesse with it. That was one of my best ones of the day. Spun that one well. Hopefully this helped on your forehand journey. It's definitely been helping on mine. Even though it's not the main thing I focused on, it's not gonna be bad to have a better forehand, and it's definitely something I will work on to continue to hopefully push it past 400 feet to 425, maybe ideally, eventually. But I'm excited to take some rest, get some breaks. Hope you guys enjoy these videos on vacation. Go ahead and watch the last one right down here. Yeah. Thank you so much, Flippy, for sponsoring this video. Go buy their gear. It's really good. You'll like it. That's all. Okay. Love you guys. Bye.